Welcome. I'm Shelly O'Neal from the Green Velvet Couch, and I'm a therapist, a wellness coach, and certified corporate wellness specialist. On this podcast, I have the honor of talking to people who will be sharing their inspiring stories about how they've overcome obstacles to really live their life to the fullest. Hopefully, you'll leave the podcast being challenged, informed, and sharing a few laughs as we talk about hard things in a relaxing and fun manner. And as the owner of a 100-plus employee healthcare company, I know firsthand that corporate wellness is personal wellness. Hello. I have worked with my guest today for a long time over on the billing side of mental health care. Sonda Kunzi is joining us today, and she's the CEO of Coding Advantage. She's been a huge asset to the healthcare group that I own, and I'm so thankful not only for her wisdom, but her encouragement as we continue to navigate all the pieces of the insurance billing arena, which, Sonda, you know, can be quite frustrating at times. You have over 30 years of experience in healthcare. You hold many nationally recognized certifications in coding, billing, auditing, and compliance. But that's only part of the reason that we've worked with her. I am so drawn to the fact that you have a special heart and focus on behavioral health. And I've really been looking forward to having this conversation. So welcome, Sonda.
Thank you so much. I have totally been looking forward to this as being the person who is on a podcast versus hosting one. So this is very exciting for me too, to be able to share on your podcast and hear things about you and then help talk about those as well.
Well, I'm glad that the tables are turned this time. I had a blast on your podcast. But yeah, we'll kind of switch roles here. Well, one of the things I really want to talk about, and I know you're passionate about this too, is tell me some of the interesting components to the work you do with behavioral health providers.
Yeah. So, I mean, I really like supporting all providers. Let's be real. I support a lot of functional medicine, a lot of other specialties, maybe OBGYN, but I don't get too deep with them as much as I get with the behavioral health groups because one of the questions I start with is tell me about your mission because I need to know as they're getting started with me, what is their whole mission in their organization to work with patients. And I don't always ask that of physicians or a physician group or an
Mhm.
OBGYN group. The physicians, yes, their mission is to make people well. But I really believe the behavioral organizations tend to go beyond that, especially in the community where they're taking care of all kinds of people from all walks of life. And I just find that a whole lot more interesting, the diversity that they do in helping people get better, helping them get jobs, doing paperwork for disability. They have, I believe, a deeper sense on taking care of their patients from a different perspective because a physician who sees a patient with hypertension has the opportunity to couple of medications here and we'll get you better. We'll get you stable on medications. And yes, you can use
Mhm.
medications in psychiatry. But when we're talking about mental health and that you're not always going to find a pill, there's many, many avenues that these organizations take care of their patients. And my job is to match it to a billable CPT code and service. And sometimes that's difficult.
Well, I just appreciate you saying that. I don't think I've heard someone ever talk about it in those terms before. And I appreciate the fact that you discuss how complex it is and
Mhm.
intimate at the same time.
Yeah.
And behavioral health it's both. You're so intimate and you're on that journey with that person, regardless why they're coming in.
Exactly. And when you think about it too, when you look at behavioral health care, you're also talking about episodes of care where patients are in a level of like IOP or PHP. And for those of you who don't know, that's intensive outpatient treatment and partial hospitalization that are not something you see in the regular medical community. So we have to look at the patient as a whole and come at them in a couple of different ways in order to take care of them as well as meet the guidelines of those services that they need a certain number of hours per week. And other providers are just not, they're not given that
Mhm,
requirement.
mhm.
And
And there's such a balance there when someone is improving
and
Mhm.
they're beginning to function better daily. Their symptoms are decreasing. And for the first time in maybe a very long time, they're hopeful and they're actually excited about their future because they can now get up and shower and they're able to go back to work and parent again or whatever life entails. But then when you say to them, your coverage has stopped and you can't
Mm.
continue your IOP because your insurance isn't going to pay for it is another level of trauma for someone whose life may be at stake to receive these services.
Yeah. And I think, and even on top of that, we have these health behavioral assessment and intervention codes that are out there that literally are talking about medical problems that have a behavioral component to them. And now we're recognizing that we have to fix the behavioral first to get to the medical piece of it. So, and that's another really interesting aspect to behavioral health being that even when people have medical problems, you can usually point it back to a behavioral problem that's going on. And when we fix that, we can help fix the medical side too.
I remember the situation where we had a patient whose spouse had completed suicide, and
Mm.
they were obviously very devastated, and everything about that person's life had changed. And we were working with their employer as well, making arrangements so they could receive services and that sort of thing, and then working with the payer as well, so we could be reimbursed for providing the service. But at the core of everything was this person not getting those services. It wasn't optional. So to have someone like you that we can and our whole team works very closely with you
Mhm.
that you advocate for the patient. And I think when people see billing and coding, one of the things they don't see is the advocacy that you do, whether it's a patient of mine or someone else's, but you're the person often that assures that they get services because you do help navigate the reimbursement piece of it.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that because I do take it to heart when we get together and you're right, it's not just about did this get paid or not or did what we need an authorization. We have to go back and where I intervene and where I feel like I'm doing the best advocating for both the patient and the provider is to say, what was your intent? I mean, where did you want to go with this patient? How often did
Mhm.
you feel they needed to be seen? How is the patient doing? What are you doing? Therapeutic interventions? Because sometimes you're so caught up, like you said, in the intimate relationship of getting the patient better, you might miss a step that is obvious to me from a billing coding perspective. And we really don't even want therapeutic folks to try to think of every billing and compliance step. That's why we're
Mhm.
here to give you that, but we'll walk you through it. Well, what did you want to do? What was the intent here? And then be able to say, that's not what I'm reading here. And not that we put words in your mouth, but we just bring it to you to say, oh, is that what you did? You just need to write that.
Yes,
Right.
yes. Yes. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's huge. That's because I think we can get as therapists so far down in the weeds clinically that looking at what we need to do because we know the ins and outs of the situation, but from your perspective, this is what you need to express to the payer, and
Hmm.
it's like, oh, the sea has parted. Like, thank you for clarifying that because that's important.
I would tell you 90% of the time when I've read a note where there are elements missing and I meet with the clinician, they completely give me the backstory of the patient, and I'm like, "Yep, but it's not here. Oh my goodness, you missed the step." And I get it. It's really rough. I think I've said it before. If I literally had to be evaluated every day for what I write, and sometimes when I write my own notes of my to-do list, I don't
Mhm,
even understand what I wrote because it was important for
mhm,
me to write it at that point in time, and it had a purpose, but I missed the mark. So it doesn't surprise me that clinicians miss the mark, and it's never a one and done thing. You just have to keep going back and back and go, let's just reiterate. Don't forget to write this. Don't forget to write that. Again, it's not easy because there's so much to write.
mhm. Yes, exactly. Well, and speaking of that, one of the things I want to talk about is it's such a heavily regulated industry. And
Mhm,
when I work with other healthcare groups and I do presentations and trainings and things, one of the things we talk about is that chronic stress
mhm,
because you may feel wonderful about the work or the progress that you were able to see today, but then tomorrow you have to get up and do it all over again, and then the next day and the next day while you're being very regulated and laws
mhm.
change and things like that. So, talk to me about how you stay inspired and then how companies related to corporate wellness can also navigate that.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to stay inspired, and I want to admit that I'm not always inspired because sometimes you read a regulation, you say, "You've got to be kidding me." That it's maybe not updated to the way things are. It's been a regulation for a while, but it doesn't make sense. And when I go into organizations, I like to motivate people from a perspective of the coding and billing. I like to bring to light, we talk about the things that they do, and then I say, and that regulation really would actually cover you if we just kind of wrote it like this. And you just need to leverage what they want done with the work that you're doing. And I honestly would prefer to be able to be speaking about billing and compliance in the most inspiring way possible than
Mhm,
just reiterating from a PowerPoint of here's regulation number one and regulation number two. Nobody could
mhm,
ever remember that, nor could they function and stay inspired themselves. You do
mhm,
have to get to the point in the heart of the matter of what you're doing as the clinician and even as the employer. And in some cases, as some employers can go outside of their insurance and welcome wellness from a mental health perspective in another manner. And that's really inspiring when that happens.
mhm. Right. I love that we're now seeing lots of options for wellness that aren't clinical, but they're still supportive,
Mhm.
educational, and valuable. So I love that we're seeing more and more of those as options from companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely companies are investing in their wellness. They
Mhm.
always talk about think about this. They always talk about cost, healthcare cost, cost, cost. But then you hear them talk about we're going to make an investment in wellness. It's a different language for them.
Yeah, most definitely it is. And I feel like I'm always circling back to if you want a healthy employee, you have to have a healthy person first. I think every other podcast I say this healthy employees just don't show up if they're not healthy people. So really assessing and addressing what that company or business needs regardless of the size and relating it back to what are the specific needs of the employees? And I think that's just huge.
Agree. And I think even on my podcast, we were talking a little bit about what you do for your own employees. And that's a whole part of the thing, too, of adopting wellness and a bunch of people who are trying to make everyone well through a behavioral health. And in my group and my team members, I think that we have a different aspect, right? Because we're all remote. So it's very
Mhm.
hard. And two, we're doing coding and billing. And so we're not really touching lives. And so it's really hard for people to be inspired sometimes. But we've taken the approach where we make it where they can work around their child's schedule. You got to leave to go get your kid? Fine. We just don't, we know what clients you work on. And so we won't make a meeting at that time. You need to take your child to the doctor? Fine. You just work a few hours later in the night. We try to make it so that it's reasonable to require them to do what we would ask somebody of, but flexible enough where we're hoping that we're not like the corporate atmosphere. We don't count keystrokes. What we count is outcomes. Is are our clients
Okay.
having the outcome they want? And if so, that means people are doing their work.
I
So
think
you
that's a
can't always do
great way
that.
to measure,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
success and
hard.
productivity.
And we have 80% behavioral health billing. So, I mean, we're really, a lot of times we're working with a lot of providers who are out doing great things. And again, like I said, sometimes our billing piece isn't like the greatest thing ever. We have to feel like, oh, we just got that paid for them. Fantastic.
Well, I'll tell you, probably don't hear it enough, but we view it as like the heroes that are guiding us and helping us, because without it, we can't help people, we can't reach our own mission. So it's so important. And I like how you're changing people's view of coding and billing. And I think being transparent and
Mhm.
showing us what it looks like, it breaks down the fear and the lack of knowledge that comes with that is, oh, I don't know anything about that, and that's scary to me. And when you're coming way closer to advocacy and educating than from this regulatory crack the whip mentality.
Yeah, doesn't it feel like that? It's like compliance, 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 and a lot of people are like, "That word is so awful." It feels so painful when someone talks about
Mhm.
compliance, and really it's just about how do we work within the guidelines and still deliver the care that we want to, and it's not always perfect. It so isn't, but I think too, being an advocate for clients who are dealing with insurance carriers, and we know that they can all have their own spin to interpreting regulations. So it is not easy at all.
Well, in talking about working with behavioral health providers and all, and the things that you do for your own team, like just flexible work days and times and all, I know that you are a runner. So share with us how that impacts your work and your own mental health.
Yeah, I think that's super important because I tend not to get up from this chair from the moment I sit in it until the time I go to bed. And sometimes that's just not good. So I wouldn't advocate on that. But I do run obstacle course racing, known as the Spartan, and that takes a lot of mental fortitude, not just physical endurance. You're constantly being given an obstacle to overcome every few miles that you run. They give you another one. You have to think through, how do I get over this? And in that, I can honestly say I have never thought of work or a problem or something going wrong at work while I'm doing it. So I know that it's so good for me to do it because I've removed work from that aspect. And sometimes I could be running all weekend. Maybe it's a Saturday run and a Sunday run. And I've done that before. But I think that anyone who does a Spartan will tell you it's 90% mental and about 10% physical because you can go at your own pace. And that also goes for working out at the gym daily. When I walk in, I leave everything behind, and that's the only time I can honestly say that I do that. In fact, I just saw my mom for a while, and the best story is I was driving her somewhere to a family wedding, and she said, "Well, won't this be great? Because now I'll be with you for 7 hours when you can't open your laptop because you're driving." So there was that too. It was clear to me at that moment that I'd work a lot.
And she was so glad to have your time and attention captured there.
Yeah. I'll admit I opened it at the rest stop to answer an email, but after that,
Gonna feel bad if it was to us.
it was crazy, but that happens.
That's just such a great example of recharging and doing
Mhm,
something that's healthy, and beneficial. Not only is it gets you out of your own head and thoughts, but it
mhm,
also is just physically beneficial. And two, it's interesting to me because that's very strategic. So you're
mhm.
still using a lot of logistical reasoning and things like that to be able to. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is way cool, and I tell everybody you should at least try the 3-mile sprint. It you can always go around an obstacle if you don't feel comfortable, but,
Mhm,
it's definitely I have become hooked on them, that's for sure, because you
mhm.
are just so strategic, and running with a partner is really great too, because then you've got somebody to work with, and it's great, I love it.
So there again, a lot of team building and just really important to rely on each other, which is the things that we tell clients. And you, I know you've told us, so I think you're
Mhm,
sharing that with behavioral health providers as well. And then you're actually living it, which is one of the neatest things. And I love how authentic you are.
oh, thank you.
And I think that's, to me, that's always an indicator of someone's health. You know, a lot of people can talk a good game and talk
Mhm.
about, are you living it? And
Mm,
then being transparent that no one that's healthy is healthy 24/7. That's just
right.
not the way it works.
Not possible.
Yes. Well, my outlet is horses. And this weekend, for the first time, I had a little mini horse delivered to my house. Snickers is his
Oh,
name.
sweet.
He's about 39 inches tall, but very similar when I am working with my horses, and he's the only mini that I have. I still love the psychology of what I do, and I love the psychology of horses and how it's very healing, and you learn so much about yourself. And it's just but in a relaxed way that's
Mhm.
also takes me out of my realm of everyday work, but I'm still looking at the psychology of animals and things.
Yeah. But you get a break from the everyday and in your case, running a gigantic mental health, behavioral health facility. I'm trying to make sure your clinicians stay healthy. And I think we both agree that to do that, we have to maintain some peace. And that peace is when we like me running and you with the horses, it's essential. And when we don't do it, then we're not even serving the people that work for us or any kind of clients that we deal with.
Yes, absolutely. Well, my last question, and I've been wanting to ask you about this, is as a woman in business in a male dominated industry, what are some of the challenges that you faced or that you have seen your female clients face?
I think that females are more empathetic
Okay.
and males are really go straight forward and not thinking about they may or may not. I mean, we're certainly just stereotyping, but what I've seen in my just kind of group of all the consultants that I deal with that men seem to be able to get through things without maybe lamenting on them like we would or look at the empathetic avenue, not saying that there's ones that don't, but in general I think that I've had to make my way in the last 10 years as a woman in business. And I would say early on, I would tell you early on it was more male dominated, but I think we're
Mhm,
starting to see a lot more female healthcare consultants who are making their way in serving their clients. But I think that, like I said, it's hard. Sometimes we'll take something to heart and lose sleep over it and do things like that when a guy can just go to sleep.
mhm,
He's all fine. So
mhm,
men in this, I would like to be like that more often, but like you said, being authentic means that when you start to help your client, you start to also take on their stress a little bit too.
mhm. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I like that you pointed that out. I will say that I don't know that I was prepared for maybe the double standard that things can be very accepted for males, where being a female business owner, just even the business side of things, I feel like there can be, not always, but there can be more scrutiny and more you need to prove how you got here.
Prove.
And
I like that. Prove how you got here is a definite.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was something that I hadn't heard anyone speak about. And
Mhm.
then being in that arena, it's been a colorful experience.
Yeah, for sure. I think it shapes us too. And I probably am not the person I was 10 years ago when I started. But I'm going to say, I'm sure you feel it too. No matter what, we still get imposter syndrome from time to time. We don't mean to, and we will counsel other people on it. But then when you're in a room and you feel like, "Oh, should I be in this room?" But the
Mhm,
answer is usually yes. You have so much to give as a person. And I can remember back just earlier on before I owned my own business, even when I was working with a hospital and I sat in the C suite with the director of this, vice president of that, and I was managing a practice. I did not feel comfortable in that room for many reasons. One was a female, another was, do I belong here? So I think
mhm,
that's really big for females. And then having my own business has created a space for me to allow myself to be in those rooms. Doesn't mean, like I said, that things don't bother you from time to time, but you certainly have a way of getting through it and you feel a little bit more powerful, especially if you have a lot of good female business owner friends where you can talk about things and having a
mhm.
community.
It's I'm telling you, there's strength in that tribe and in that community. It's huge.
Yes,
Well,
agreed.
the last thing is, what can we expect from the billing, auditing, and coding and compliance laws, regulations, trends?
Mhm.
What can we look forward to seeing? Because one of the things I love about you is you know what's coming long before anybody else does. And that's really helpful to, I think, most organizations.
Yeah, I think the great thing about having a lot of clients in the same specialty is you get to see a lot of insurance carrier responses. You get to work in different states, and then you get to see things happening specific to the specialty because you're plugged into being on listservs and things like that. And sometimes you do see things before your clients and you want to let them know. I would say in general, obviously, with the changes that Medicare brought along, we are certainly seeing recognition for the mental health community of providers that we haven't seen in the past. And in the same breath, I'm going to tell you because of COVID and the mental health needs of the community, we're seeing a lot of audits come about and for telehealth, and I feel like they are honing in on the behavioral health community as they're expanding it. They're also regulating it a little more than I have seen in the past. And I think that's just the nature of it. Whenever we have a service that has an uptake, just like plain telehealth, telehealth is being looked at quite a bit right now. I think that everyone needs to understand this is what happens is they go backwards. They're looking at older dates. So it's always important to start doing the right thing way back when and the best you can do it. So they tend to look backwards. But I think, like I said, I'm really happy to see the other providers getting in, and we just want to make sure that those regulations are held tight too, so that those who have worked really hard for their licensure are protected, and they're the ones that are getting the enrollment ability and Medicare and things like that.
Mhm. So basically, you're seeing an expansion of services with very stringent oversight.
Yes, and we need it.
Mhm.
I think
Sure.
everything is needed to a point. I think what happens though is, like I said, my wish, if I were to give you all anyone who is listening, my wish is that we could really get the insurance carriers to get on the same page. Then it wouldn't be so hard for us to develop what's actually happening into a note the way that they want to see it and make everybody happy. But I
Mhm.
think that and all things are a little bit different, but I wish that insurance carriers would follow the same or very similar regulations rather than deciding to interpret it for themselves and moving forward in their own direction that way.
Mhm. Exactly. I think that would cut out a lot of stress, a lot of confusion, more transparency and more clarity, and
Mhm.
less interpretation.
Yeah,
That would be my wish too.
let's be honest, there's nothing worse than having something looked at or a rejection, and then you call the insurance carrier, and the first thing out of their mouth is, I can't tell you how to code. Well, apparently you can because you rejected my claim and said the
Mhm.
codes weren't right. So do tell me what you want.
Yes. Yeah. Now don't keep that little nugget to yourself. Share that.
Right. Just tell us.
Yes. Yeah. Be transparent about it. Now, I think that's a great goal, and I hope that we get a lot closer to it because I think it's there again, it's so important when it comes to patient services and patient care, let alone for companies like myself. But well, that's really wonderful, and I'm so just appreciative. And I think it's really important to understand how the billing and coding and compliance piece works, and then the
Mhm.
help with the audit. So I think what you're doing is valuable on both sides of the coin for providers and for patients. So I love that. Also, I want everyone to be certain and check out our recent conversation behind the scenes with Sonda, and that's your podcast.
Yes.
And I want you to share how we can get a hold of you, how people can find you on social media, how they can listen to your podcast, because there's so much information in those podcasts. Now, you have a lot of other folks from that are doing similar things, and it makes my head just spin. But I learn so much, so I would encourage everyone to listen.
Oh, thank you. Like you said, yes, it's called Behind the Scenes with Sonda. I wasn't really inventive or special with that. For now, that's what it's called. And you can get it on Apple or Spotify. And like you said, I just like to interview different people in the behavioral health world. Sometimes I just like to chat, just me saying, this is so hard running a business and keeping your mental stability and things like that. So there's
Mhm.
a lot of just me talking, and ours is on there. Yes. We had a fantastic conversation. I've had so much feedback on it already. So
Mm.
if anyone hasn't listened to it, it should. And we are on Instagram at Coding Advantage LLC. And also, I am on LinkedIn. So, trying to get the word out, trying to put more content out so folks like yourself can dig in and try to get the information you need. So, we're doing.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us today. It's been a blast.
Thanks so much for listening to Shelly O'Neal from the Green Velvet Couch. If you're enjoying the show, please rate, subscribe, and review where you listen to your podcast. That helps others find the show and begin their own wellness journey. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, go live your best life.